Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got another disassembly and maintenance video for you today, and I'm gonna do the Boker Kwaiken today. This is a knife that I've taken apart and put back together already. It's not particularly dirty or in need of service, but I figured I'd do this as a public service, because honestly, this knife is a pain in the neck to take apart. Oh, wow. And so let me just show you how it works. And it's a pain in the neck in two fronts, but the biggest of them is that this is an IKBS knife, Ikomakov bearing system. So IKBS is just a way of having a bunch of ball bearings in a little groove inside the knife. It means that the pivot is going to be a very small kind of area, but it also means that things are a pain in the neck. So the problem with IKBS is that there are little bearings that just explode and roll everywhere. And so the very first step to taking apart an IKBS knife is to give yourself some kind of a working area. And so what I've done here is taken a little silicone baking sort of vessel I stole from the kitchen at one point in time, and put it down on my workspace here, and that'll help to catch some of the bearings when they inevitably explode and roll everywhere. And then I'm going to put a little bit of towel, my little cleaning towel, inside of that, which will help to dampen the bouncing. Because you may think you're okay just working on a cookie sheet, but the little buggers bounce like crazy. So this should keep everything in check for when the IKBS go exploding out of there. Very first step on this guy is going to be to use your Torx T6 bit here. You can't read that, can you? Anyways, to disassemble the clip. So here we go. And again, sorry about the finger here. Poison ivy is not a beautiful thing in the least. It's been with me for a little while now. Come on now. And here we go. Unfortunately, this is one of the more involved disassemblies out there, partly because there are so many little parts, and you need to remove some parts to get to the next parts and whatnot. So I've pulled the pocket clip out. I'm going to go ahead and tuck the hardware over in the corner there. Now I'm going to pull these little back screws off, and these connect the titanium scales to the steel liners there. Here we go. That's a very dangerous thing, by the way, to work on an anodized surface like that. All it takes is one little slide, and next thing you know, you got a big old scratch in your anodization. And nobody likes a scratched up ano, if you know what I mean. Sorry, I hope you watched that video, or else that's not going to be terribly funny. Alrighty, going on to the other side to do the same exact thing. There we go. Pop loose. And I'm going to go ahead and pop this guy loose. Now, we are going to remove the pivot screw. So this is where we start to run into the risk of the IKBS popping loose, because as long as there's compression that's keeping the liners close to the blade, the IKBS are not going anywhere. It's not like it's a danger just walking about to have the IKBS falling out. That's not the issue here. But this is where we start running into the possibility of trouble. So here's your pivot screw. Then I'm going to go ahead and use the screwdriver here to pop the pivot pin the rest of the way out. And that also frees up this scale here. So I can actually, I'll go ahead and put that aside for the second. So on the back side, this one pops off too, and you can see that I used a little bit of frog lube on the inside there just to make sure that the steel's not going to rust up. So I can go ahead and just start off by wiping that off, making sure everything's nice and clean. And usually that's kind of my MO when I'm doing these sorts of cleanouts, is just wipe down as I go. Remove, search, and destroy any grease, gunk, dirt, unpleasantness. So the next step on the sorry, I was just reviewing the Urban Trapper. On your Kwaiken here is going to be to pull out these little tiny screws. And so for that, we're going to go back to our T6 bit, I believe. No, of course not. In fact, we're going to have to go to a smaller bit. I completely forgot about that part. But like I said, this is not a straightforward disassembly. You need a T6, a T8, and it looks like a T4 here. So let's pop that. There we go. And these guys are holding your backspacer in there. Come on now. I'm not entirely convinced that this particular bit of, these extra screws are necessary for the design. I feel like this probably could have been done by friction fitting or something like that, but hey, whatever. It works. And come on there. Perfect. All right, so now this is released, and we're in the danger zone for IKBS. So let's get these pulled out of there. And then hopefully, I'm trying my best to keep the scales together. And hey, beautiful. So here's your backspacer. Here is one side of the scales. And then in the blade here are your little IKBS balls. See them? Okay, cool. So this is probably the most orderly IKBS balls have ever been in my life. And so what I can do now is just start to work them out of there. I can start on one side, and I'm just going to use my little spring bar tool / oiler. Come on now. To get inside there and push them on out of the groove. There we go. And so hopefully you can see these are just a bunch of little tiny fiddly balls. And there's nothing else to them whatsoever. There's not like a steel cage like you get on your Shirogorov multi-row bearings. They're just sitting in there in this little groove. Come on. And they are not going to cooperate with you generally, especially when you've got any kind of grease on them. And that's a good thing, eventually, but it does mean that these have a tendency to go everywhere, because they will attach to your tool, and then you'll set the tool down, and then suddenly there's one on your carpet, and then, you know, you get one on your shoe, and then next thing you know, you're in a hotel in Brazil, and you look down, and there's an IKBS ball on your shoe, and I haven't had that one happen personally, but, you know, that's how IKBS gets spread around the world, really. It's contagious like that. See, got a little passenger here, an IKBS ball. Come on. That has stuck itself to the handle here. So, now we have the blade, and the blade is clear. The blade is clean. And we can look at the little pivot here for the IKBS. See, the ball's sitting in that little groove there. And that's how it works. And that's part of the reason why it's a very secure lockup. A very secure hold of the blade. Because there are so many of these little balls. They're really supporting the blade on all sides. But it's a pain in the neck when you're doing maintenance. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe the blade down here. And again, this doesn't need that much love because I disassembled it recently. And one other thing to remember is that if you lose a ball or two in the IKBS system, you're okay. There's no major fault. There's no major harm. That's just the way that life is sometimes. So, yeah, that's something you got to keep in mind. Alrighty, let's go ahead and start putting the little guy back together because there's just not all that much dirty or wrong here. So, the very first step is going to be to start working on the side that you're going to... Actually, let me show you one other thing here. Right now I've got all the IKBS balls just kind of loose rolling around in here. That's fine because they're not going to be able to go anywhere. But, let's see if I can coax them off of the blade. Sometimes, especially when the knife is a little bit grimy or grungy, I swear these little guys, it's like herding cats. No good. I'm so sorry, guys. This, my friends, is why I prefer captive bearings. There we go. Got it. So now what I'm just going to do is run the IKBS balls against this microfiber cloth. And what that'll actually do, and just using my finger, rolling them around on there, just like how you can clean out a... For those of you who remember back when computer mice had balls rather than sensors, same basic idea. You're just rolling it on a paper towel, on a cloth, on a whatever, to get some of the grease off of there and make sure that they're nice and clean. So, there you go. Make sure that I've got all the balls in a row here. So, one little frustration here is that you can, on this knife, let's see here, yeah. You can, in fact, put the, it's not so much a frustration, but it's a thing, is that you can put one scale on there, and that scale is the one that holds the captive pivot screw. Oh, there went my over travel stop. Here we go, find the right bit. This is another reason why every time a knife maker decides that they're going to put a, they're going to use multiple sizes of Torx or Allen or whatever on the blade or on different parts of the knife, I get very sad wherever I'm sitting. you know, I'm at home someplace, and suddenly this wave of sadness washes over me because somewhere Brad Southard just decided he's going to use 4 different kinds of Torx bits on there. I don't know that that's something Brad Southard would do necessarily, but, you know, who knows. So I'm going ahead and I'm reattaching this. And I have to do it in this order, which is different than I initially did, because if you recall, the pivot screw, the pivot shaft, I suppose, needs to come through on this side. And it needs to go on the outside of this titanium scale. Come on now. I'm just trying to convince this to pop through here. This is just not making my life easy. So guys, this is a good reminder that even if you're thinking to yourself you're not a professional, neither am I, yet I still get all this done. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here, because I feel like I've failed in some important way at life, is I'm going to loosen that up a little bit. There we go. And then pop it back through. Another thing you got to remember is that on this particular guy, hopefully you can see this, there is actually a flat surface here. So you want to make sure that that flat surface is in the right orientation to basically to touch your scale. And so what I've done here is I'm using this scale, which has that little flat side, as a sort of wrench. And so I'm making sure that where the pivot is, they're in alignment, and so the knife can go back together in the proper way. So there you go. You just need it roughly in the right area. Now I'm going to use a little bit of 10-weight Nano-Oil on the actual pivot, and that's to help the blade glide smoothly. Just kind of swabbing it around mostly with the edge of the applicator here. That should be more than enough. I'm going to drop the backspacer back in here. And now we have a good little host for the blade. As for the blade, this is an IKBS knife, and so the unpleasant thing is that you actually have to, you can't just go ahead and align all of the balls on here like you could with the Shirogorov, where you had the nice little cage for the bearings. Instead, you have to align them inside the blade and then very carefully mate the blade and the handle. In order to get the IKBS balls to stay in, you need some kind of a thicker grease, and in this case, I'm actually going to use the 85-weight Nano-Oil. You can do this with any other kind of grease. I like the Nano-Oil just because I've got some and it works well. But what I'm going to go ahead and do here is just put a liberal coating of this Nano-Oil inside the IKBS track here. And that'll provide a nice greasy surface for the for those balls to kind of hang out in. I'm also going to put a little bit on the pivot track here, just for good measure. That's maybe a little much, but hey, whatever. It works. And I'm sorry, I meant that on the detent track. So now what you can do is either using a pair of tweezers, which I have around here someplace. Got me a tweezers. Don't run away. Sorry, guys. You would think I would have my stuff together. There they are. So now you can either use a pair of tweezers, if you've got some, to start dropping the balls into your IKBS pivot. Sometimes they stick together, which is helpful. Sometimes they do not. Come on. And you just want to drop one by one. Or the other thing you can do is put a little bit of, using like an oiler tip like this, you can get it covered in some oil and then use the oil effectively as an adhesive to pick up these tiny little balls. And so you do it more like this. Oh, almost had a combo there. There we go, combo. Perfect. That'll stick. You just got to make sure they're roughly seated inside there, and that there are enough of them to roughly fill in that space. And it's okay if one side has a couple more, a couple fewer. Ideally, you want them all, but I'm just going to go back, put a little bit more oil on there, lift, go grab that middle one, lift. I'm so close, yet so far. Drop a couple more. Alrighty. Perfect. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and drop one more in here. And two. Why not? There we go. So I've got a little bit more grease than I need there, so I'm going to use just a little corner of a paper towel. and soak up a little bit more of the Nano-Oil. Being very careful not to pick up the bearings in the process, because that's no good at all. And checking for stragglers. Ah, darn it. Just knocked a couple of them loose, but that's okay. Life goes on. Beautiful. So, that's one half of the blade that is IKBS'd in. So remember that we put together already this half of the knife, basically. So everything is good to go over here. All that we need to do now is make sure that the stop pin, which is an internal stop pin, so it slides through the blade, goes in, and then mate the two of them with the IKBS balls in there, happily, like so. So now at this point, the proximity of the blade and the scale here will keep the balls on that side inside the handle, which is a beautiful thing. We don't have to worry about those anymore. So now we just rinse and repeat on the other side. And again, you can see here, this is a captive stop pin sort of thing, internal stop pin. And so it stops the blade here. Oh, Nick, you shouldn't have demonstrated. What I just saw is little IKBS balls starting to fall out. Sorry, guys. So I just got to realign a couple of these. I let a little bit too much space in there, and the balls just started going everywhere. I really hope that they're not looking at the captions for these videos without context, because, oh boy, that's no good. So, now that your balls aren't flying everywhere, I'm going to redo what I just did, where I mate the scale and the handle, being very careful not to use any harsh movements. Beautiful. Keeping it nice and pressed down there, I can set it down, and redo the other side. Use a little less oil this time around. But don't hesitate to put a little extra here. Remember that IKBS tends to ship with actual grease on it. So you're not exactly going to hurt anything by running it wet. And like I said, any kind of grease will work usually. But if you use something really viscous, or certainly anything kind of gritty, you're going to have a lesser action for it. I'm actually going to switch to the tweezers, because for some reason these are fighting me. I'm not saying I'm better with the tweezers, but I'm just saying it's there. One other thing that you can do on occasion that makes me certainly feel like I'm not terribly brilliant man is when you drop a bearing inside the little hole there. And then you have to flip the whole thing over and shake, or go in there with tweezers and try and retrieve, mount a rescue mission. It's just unpleasant, especially because you're going to have trouble keeping the balls on the other side still in position. So this process right here is why a lot of people just don't like working with IKBS. Oh no. This is why you want tweezers on hand. So you can see here, I'll move center this a little bit more. Sorry about that, guys. I dropped two of the IKBS balls into the stop channel. You just got to make sure you find those. Oh, come on now. There we go. I've heard other solutions to the IKBS problem, like you mount get a magnetic disassembly mat, or you disassemble it with a magnet right by there so that any bearings that drop free are gonna just get attracted over to it. Sounds fine. I like my little version here with the Great Wall of IKBS. Come on now. And I'm beating up on IKBS here a little bit, but at the same time, this is the same issue with any other kind of non-captive bearing system. And we have one little straggler right here on the edge of the blade. So I'm going to reach over and try and convince him to come loose. There we are. And there we go. Now, I got this guy used, and when I got it used, there weren't quite enough of the bearings in there. Somebody had lost a couple. So you can see there's a little tiny gap in there, but you know what? That's okay. Those bearings are going to distribute themselves just fine over the course of time. No issue. Now that we've got everything in there, the next step is to reinsert the backspacer, and then reattach the handle on this side. And because we aligned the pin there in the center properly earlier, it just drops right on, and we're not trying to do that right now with a bunch of bearings sitting around. So that's good. Right now, we can't quite yet put this pin back in, no matter how much the IKBS is scaring us and making us want to, because we need to have the scale on first. Now what I'm going to do is find a small bit, Torx T4, and put the backspacer screws back in, and desperately hope that I've got the backspacer roughly in alignment. And I do. Go figure. And it's always a good policy when you're doing something like this to make sure that your backspacer or whatever you're screwing on is fully in alignment on all of the holes before you lock any one of them down. As I always say, and unfortunately it's mostly due to bad experiences with bad companies using soft screws, you never want to fully screw something in unless you're damn sure of it, because every time you run the risk of stripping it out a little bit. Luckily, this Boker seems to be okay in terms of screw stripping. So now that I know everything is in alignment and I'm happy with the spacing, I'm just going to tighten that down a little bit more fully. Always just hand tight. And these are screws that don't need any kind of Loctite, because if they come loose, you won't be able to tell, because there's a scale on top of them. Now we go back to our scale here. Drop that on there. And with a great deal of gratitude, because this seals those IKBS little buggers in there forever and ever, I'm going to go ahead and drop the pivot in. But actually, for the pivot, I am going to go ahead and use a little tiny bit of blue Loctite here. I love this stuff so much. And as always, the best approach, I'm going to go ahead and take my oiler here. I'm going to clean off the oil that was on it. And then get a little bit of the Loctite on top of it. And then I'm going to go around the edge of the screw here. Hopefully you can see this. Yeah. And apply a little tiny bit of the Loctite to the screw itself. Not a whole lot. Probably barely just enough to make a difference, but I just want a little bit of a break on the screw backing itself out. And I'm just putting this in barely tight, enough so that I know where it's at, and it's going to keep those IKBS in there. Now I'm going to switch to the other screwdriver because Boker hates me, Nick Shabazz. Screw that in. Screw that in. There we go. Those two are screwed in now. Now, before the Loctite gets too hardened, although it takes a little longer than this, I'm going to go ahead. Everything is reassembled except the clip. I'm going to check the action. There we go. There's no blade play at the moment, and the blade is roughly centered, but I want to give it a little bit more tension just to make sure. There we go. Perfect. Blade centering is good. On my last video, a couple of people commented, you should always check blade centering. Yeah, you always should. That's something I'm kind of doing automatically and not even thinking about it. Oh, interesting. Would you look at that? The backspacer screw isn't exactly in there solidly, which is just sad and depressing to me. Oy, oy, oy. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is a little trick. Sorry about this, guys. I really should seem more competent on the camera, but I didn't look at the bottom side of the backspacer. My issue here is this, and that's what's making the blade seem a little bit uncentered. So I'm going to unscrew these screws right over here. Come on now. And that should allow me... Oh, snap. That's the wrong side. Okay. I live, I learn, right? As I said, this is one of the most complicated non-automatic, non-interesting knives I've had to disassemble in a long, long time. I don't see why it is as complicated as it is. It doesn't need to be. And we're paying the price for that, because there are just so many damn screws and layers and things like that. It's honestly a little ugly. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to slide the scale out of the way slightly. Switch out the driver yet again. Thank you, Boker. And that seems to be implying that this screw is not in quite right. So I'm going to back this screw out. I'm going to pinch nice and hard. Interesting. I'm going to back the rest of them out too, because maybe that's a part of my issue. Some part of me feels like I should stop the camera because I'm not seeming super confident at the moment, but what on earth is going on up in here? Could it be that the screws are of different length? Maybe I just need a little more torque. I just don't know. Okay, yeah, I just needed to torque that down a little bit. Well, and you can see now that that spacing has gone away. Congratulations, if you've made it this far in the video, you are much more dedicated to watching knife disassembly videos than most. There we go. It's still a little bit funky. This is deeply, deeply, deeply overcomplicated. There we go. Pop that in there. Redo this. Yeah, that looks good. Gotta pop these two screws back in there. Oh, come on now. If at any point in time as you're putting together a knife the screw starts to fight you, you got a problem. Do not keep fighting. Figure out what's out of alignment and then try it again, because that's how you strip screws, or worse still, you cross-thread things. No good. It's a good rule of thumb in general. If you're ever screwing and you get the sense that you should stop, go ahead and stop. Okay, there we go. That's better. Now finally, I'm going to go ahead and drop the pocket clip back on in here. And with that, our Boker Kwaiken, despite a good deal of complexity that I really would have rather not shown the internet, but hey, you guys already know I am not necessarily a brilliant man. Your Boker Kwaiken is reassembled, and everything's working like a charm. Beautiful. I hope this has been at least mildly interesting. Sorry for the delays in there, but hopefully you see my problem-solving methods, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.